Hi, everyone. My name is Kaitlin Dyroff, and I am a student in the graduate program. My capstone project is focusing on the influence of remote work on employee job satisfaction. I'm jumping right in. I'd like to first start with some acknowledgements. I'd like to thank my family and friends, and mainly my husband for his unconditional love and support as I've been working on this graduate program and on this capstone project. He's given me a lot of advice on handling grad life and work-life balance. I couldn't have done this without him. I would also like to thank Dr. Pulizzi for all of her guidance, encouragement, help, and support. Ultimately, my writing has become better because of her feedback, and I really appreciate all of her encouragement throughout the journey. I would also like to thank Dr. Podber for the really detailed explanation, statistical knowledge, and thoughtful suggestions for my analysis section. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of you, my cohort, for challenging me with your thoughts and your ideas. My peers have been such a valuable support and really great network for feedback. So getting into some of the details of my study, I wanted to first provide just an overview of my abstract. The purpose of this study is to investigate contributors to job satisfaction, primarily focusing on the relationship between remote work and employee job satisfaction. In addition, I'm interested in variables such as age category, location, job type, and job tenure as mediators. Employees from a large New York healthcare clinic are going to be recruited to participate in this study, which will include employees who work remotely full-time, on-site full-time, as well as employees who work a hybrid remote schedule from a number of base locations and job roles. Participants, as a part of this study, will complete an online survey, which will collect demographic information and survey responses about their job satisfaction. The study's primary hypothesis suggests that job satisfaction scores will differ on average by remote status. To assess my primary hypothesis, I plan on using a two-way ANOVA to compare mean differences between groups that include two independent variables or factors. Results are anticipated to support the primary hypothesis that remote work has a positive relationship with job satisfaction. In addition, age category, location, job type, and job tenure are also each anticipated to mediate the relationship between remote work and job satisfaction. The major anticipated finding is that hybrid remote work opportunities may provide the most flexibility and opportunity to ultimately increase employee job satisfaction. So now that we've gone through the abstract, we're going to jump into the introduction section. I'm going to provide some background, ultimately, for the foundation of this project. Remote work and globalization is a very important area to study, especially in IO psychology, given the radical changes to the workforce following the pandemic. I became interested in this topic after a majority of organizations were at least temporarily forced into remote operations, if not halted altogether. I'm interested in seeing how these industries, employers, and employees respond to ultimately the abrupt mandate and changes since then that have adjusted their workplace culture. I'm interested to know how employee productivity, stress, and job satisfaction have been impacted. What links me to this topic and really drove my interest was experiencing this firsthand. Prior to the pandemic, I never had the opportunity to work remote at my current job or at any of my previous positions. I did pursue this master's program particularly with the interest of online remote learning. I know that this topic has been longstanding of interest to researchers, given the impact of globalization on businesses, for instance. It's been widely studied. Researchers have investigated topics such as communication channels, connections between people and businesses that were previously not available due to geographic constraints. However, the impact of technological advancement and social support, social media support, as well as developing travel options have really all contributed to this. It's evident that remote work is not applicable to all workforces and all industries. Not all workforces have the infrastructure support to sustain remote-placed work. However, in cases that do, how does remote work impact job satisfaction? So some theoretical frameworks behind the literature that exists. Empirical research has demonstrated that remote work allows for opportunities and benefits that are not available within on-site or in-office work environments. Elements such as flexibility and autonomy stemming from remote work positions have been found to be positively associated with enhanced motivation, productivity, as well as positive perceptions and attitudes about work. The positive effects from remote positions have been demonstrated to aid job satisfaction by a bulk of studies outlined in my literature review. Remote work alone does not solely influence job satisfaction. However, a number of studies have found that a combination of factors are expected to have an influence. So a summary of my literature review, pretty much my literature review first works to define the variable studied as a part of this project. So first, I found there were many different distinct definitions of remote work. The phrase remote work or working from home is explicitly defined as working from one's home or residence, or could more broadly refer to working outside of the office, not just limited to one's home, but could be inclusive of other off-site locations. Prior to the pandemic, remote work was a popular arrangement, but it was less common in the workforce than it is today. The Pew Research Center, for instance, reports that prior to March 2020, less than 23% of Americans were working remotely, where today, remote work has become quite commonplace. A second significant definition stemming from the literature review is the definition of job satisfaction. Job satisfaction can be outlined by a number of descriptors, including a positive emotional state resulting from enjoyment of one's job or job experiences, as well as elements of autonomy, flexibility, and motivation. Continuous advancement of technology and digital communication have been influential factors in the progression of increased working from home, such as advancements or supportive infrastructure that make it easier. For instance, Zoom meetings and Outlook chats, all to enhance communication. Cultural and societal opinion also has heavily influenced the permanent fixture of working from home opportunities. Generational preferences also, for instance, Gen Z growing up in an era of technology, whereas other generations needing to actively learn or progress with technological skill sets. These generations also have different just preferences for their setup and communication styles, which also plays into the feasibility of working from home. Literature review has also found that individual factors such as age, location, economic factors, learning abilities, as well as independent or personal well-being have shown to have an impact on how well employees adjust to working from home. Literature review has also shown a number of advantages and disadvantages to working from home. For instance, a study that I really heavily relied on as a part of my literature review by Shaw outlined that working from home allows for greater flexibility and financial gains just by saving on the cut of commuting, less time commuting, less money spent on transport, there's some other benefits outside of the initial view. Some research supports theories that working from home increases productivity, whereas other research suggests the opposite, that working from home hinders productivity. It allows for employees to become distracted or less interested. One long-held critique of remote work has been that it allows for more home distractions. Other interesting limitations from literature review, an empirical study conducted by Prasad et al. In 2020 surveyed IT and e-commerce employees during the first year of the pandemic. And they outlined a number of limitations, including individual emotional elements such as lack of interpersonal relationships with their employees, lack of work-life balance, being unable to separate elements of being home versus elements of work, as well as certain feelings of burnout, isolation, bad health habits, feelings of paranoia about being surveillance or like supervised or work surveillance on their home computer. Additional research highlights other factors. Menendez et al., for instance, found that a lack of supervision and a lack of accountability, as well as just consistent standard operating procedures, if everyone is not uniform and together, might also pose challenges to the success of working from home or working remotely. In summary, ultimately, remote work opportunities were previously a rarity in the American workforce. However, following the progression and aftermath of the pandemic, remote work opportunities are now really prominent within the workforce. And considering this transformed occupational landscape, there's a need to understand how this new reality influences the workforce, if it makes our work better or if it makes our work worse. And there has been research ultimately looking into both sides of the spectrum. I also included just some key studies that I heavily relied on as a part of my literature review on this slide, although there are a number of studies that I pulled from. Okay, so ultimately, remote work opportunities were previously not commonplace. Now, however, they are much more commonplace. And considering this transformed landscape, we ultimately need to figure out why this is important for IO psychologists to investigate. Less research exists about the potential mediating variables of remote work on job satisfaction. This project aims to examine the relationship between remote work and job satisfaction, as well as confounding variables contributing to the existing literature on this topic. Statement of research questions, kind of following along with that, my three big questions here are: how do remote work opportunities influence employee job satisfaction? What confounding variables exist and contribute to this relationship? And why is it important for the field of IO psychology? Ultimately, this is important to IO psychology because today's workforce is focused on obtaining and optimizing job satisfaction following the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. The study of remote work opportunities as a contributor to job satisfaction is so important to be able to anticipate hiring trends, human resource management policies, and industry expectations and guidelines. So my hypotheses from this study, I have 4 hypotheses. My primary hypothesis is that job satisfaction scores will differ on average by remote status. My hypothesis 1B, stemming from this, is that job satisfaction scores will differ on average generationally. I'm going to look at different age categories. I'm ultimately interested in seeing how the baby boomer generation versus non-baby boomer generation responds. Hypothesis 1C, remote status and baby boomer status will interact to predict job satisfaction scores. That is ultimately, job satisfaction scores will differ on average by remote status, but this relationship will be different for baby boomers versus non-baby boomers. My second hypothesis is that job satisfaction scores will differ on average by location. I'm going to be looking at groups of remote workers versus non-remote workers. Stemming from this, hypothesis 3, job satisfaction scores will differ on average by job type. I'm going to be looking at an array of different job roles, including administrative and medical job roles. And then my fourth hypothesis is that greater tenure or time with the company or in a position will be associated with greater job satisfaction. And I'll also be looking at groups of remote workers versus non-remote workers. Variables of this study. So my independent variable for this study is remote status. I'm going to be surveying participants whether they work remote or on site, and if they do work remote, are they full-time remote or are they hybrid? Other independent demographic variables I'm going to be looking at, I'm going to be looking at age categories. I would like to separate it into generational categories for my first hypothesis, B. I'm also going to be looking at demographic information such as location. The clinic that I'm going to be working with has 3 branches. One is based in Manhattan, New York City. One branch is based up in Westchester, and the third branch is based out on Long Island. Each branch has multiple offices, but I'm going to be looking at, just to keep things simple, each branch location, seeing if there's any differences there. And then lastly, for independent variables, I'm going to be looking at job tenure, or how many years with the company has each survey employee been tenured at the company for. My dependent variables for this study, I'm primarily looking at job satisfaction, and that's going to be measured by a survey score. We'll get into this in a little bit more detail in the later slides, but ultimately I will be administering a survey, which will be a scored survey from which job satisfaction scores will be produced. Oops, sorry, everybody. Okay. There we go. The study sample will include employees recruited from a large-scale New York City fertility clinic, a healthcare clinic that I work at. Participation will be optional to all 3 branches of the practice. So that includes New York City. There are 5 offices there. Westchester, which includes 3 offices, and Long Island, which includes 6 offices. Participation will be optional and offered to all employees who are willing to participate. These participants will be recruited from all available departments, including patient services, finance, marketing, human resources, operations, research, and clinical positions such as nursing, phlebotomy, physicians, andrology, operating room staff, as well as from a number of positions. Will include assistants, financial coordinators, care coordinators, nurses, doctors. Everyone at the practice is invited to participate, hopefully to get a wide array of different types of job roles to be inclusive of ultimately multiple position types and multiple factors. My criteria for participation: participants must be at least 18 years old and employed at the clinic for a minimum of 3 months to participate. Study design. So this slide will consider what tools are needed to collect data, how to collect data for the study. Data will be collected via an anonymous survey administered via Google Forms. Surveys will include questions about demographic data, including age, organizational branch, department, job type, and tenure, as well as independent variable data, remote work. Are you a remote worker? Yes or no? If so, part-time or full-time. Dependent variable data will include the job satisfaction scores, as well as ultimately the immediate demographic data. On the following page here, I wanted to highlight the research measure that I would be using to assess job satisfaction. Measures of job satisfaction are going to include the satisfaction of employees in healthcare scale. So this is the scale that you see here on the screen. It includes a number of questions based on a Likert scale about how fulfilled employees in the healthcare setting feel about their position, and how satisfied they are with their workplace. And the second scale that I'm going to be using is the work-family conflict scale. This measure is also a Likert-based scale that is scored, that assesses work from home balance, that stemming from our literature review as a prominent topic contributing to job satisfaction. To assess remote work, I'm ultimately going to use a 3 scale that I adapted for the purpose of this study, or a 3 measure scale that I adopted for the purposes of study. It's going to ask whether or not participants regularly engage in remote work, and will be included in the appendix section. Additional measures or methods. Employees at the clinic will be notified of the study's availability via the company's monthly newspaper letter. All employees will be invited to participate in the study and emailed a link to the study's online platform. Eligible participants eligibility criteria will be outlined to participants at enrollment. And if recruitment is low, a small incentive such as a gift card or a departmental lunch might be offered. If only if participants are still needed, the survey might be expanded and become available and open to the public via participation on forums such as LinkedIn and Reddit. A notification about the study in terms of participants would be posted to these venues, matching the content and posted that was posted at the clinic's newsletter if the participation is low. Enrolled participants will be administered an online survey via Google Forms. All participants must complete an informed consent form in order to enroll. Informed consent will be collected and submitted at the beginning of the survey, during which the participants are briefed on the nature of the study, what's involved, risks and benefits of participating. The study will take about 10 to 20 minutes about to complete. And the survey will assess variables including opportunity, job satisfaction, work from home balance as outlined by the previous slides. Risks of participation. There are minimal risks of participating. Potential benefits of participating include a discussion about occupational topics that might make some people feel open and positive about. On the other hand, they may make people feel uncomfortable, but participants can ultimately decline to participate at any time if they would like. Additional benefits to participating. Participation will aid to the bulk of existing industrial and organizational research, reflecting work satisfaction. Study participants will then be prompted after they complete the survey. Sorry, everybody. The survey, so pretty much after they complete the survey, they're going to receive a debriefing measure, ultimately reviewing the topic and the nature of the study, as well as once the study is finalized, copies of the data analysis, and conclusions will be reported to the same outlets that were used for recruitment, including the company's monthly email newsletter, or if on LinkedIn or Reddit, the same forum. Planned analysis. So a brief overview of planned analysis. Following the execution of the study's procedures, including participant recruitment, survey administration, and data collection, the data produced will be coded, cleaned, analyzed, interpreted, and ultimately reported under the results and discussion section. My plan of analysis will include a descriptive analysis, which will detail measures of central tendency, such as mean, median, mode, calculations of the variables. Statistical measures will also be used to approach data analysis, best suited to demonstrate if each hypothesis is or is not supported. Sorry about that. The expected categorical data includes independent variables of location, job type, remote status, and age category. Expected numerical data will include the independent variables of participant job tenure and the dependent variable of job satisfaction score on the study survey. My primary hypothesis is that job satisfaction scores will differ on average by remote status. Stemming from this, job satisfaction scores will differ on average for baby boomers versus non-baby boomers. And my hypothesis C, remote status and baby boomer status will interact to predict job satisfaction scores. They will differ on average by remote status, but it'll be different for baby boomers versus non-baby boomers. So to assess hypothesis 1, which we'll be using a two-way ANOVA, which will be utilized to compare mean differences between groups that include two independent variables or factors. If this test is significant, a two-key post hoc test will be carried out to determine if full-time remote status is different from hybrid remote status. Within the results and discussion section, data will be visually represented with a means plot. The categories of age or baby boomer status will be on separate lines. Remote status will be on the x-axis and satisfaction will be on the y-axis. My second hypothesis is that job satisfaction scores will differ on average by location. In order to assess this hypothesis, we plan to use a one-way ANOVA, which compares the means of independent groups in order to evaluate whether or not there's statistical evidence that the group means are significantly different. If a significant difference exists or is found by the F value, a two-key post hoc test will be carried out to determine which locations are different from other locations. Within the results and data section, data is going to be, within the results and discussion section, data will be visually represented with a means plot. Categories of location will be charted on the x-axis, and satisfaction scores will be charted on the y-axis to provide a visualization of variance. Hypothesis 3, which states that job satisfaction scores will differ on average by job type, will be assessed with an independent samples t-test in order to compare the means of job satisfaction by job type. Independent samples t-tests compare the means of two independent groups in order to be able to determine whether there is statistical evidence that the means are different. Groups include administrative workers and clinical workers. So those are the two categories that I have. Within the results and discussion section, data is going to be visually represented with a bar chart. Job type will be charted on the x-axis and job satisfaction scores will be charted on the y-axis. And lastly, hypothesis 4. To assess hypothesis 4, which states that greater tenure will be associated with greater job satisfaction, a regression analysis will be utilized to model the relationship between job tenure and job satisfaction, ultimately by fitting a linear equation to the observed data. A linear regression is used to quantify the relationship between one predictor variable, greater job tenure, and a response variable, which is greater job satisfaction. The p-value indicates whether or not a statistically significant relationship and association exists between variables, and slope will determine if the direction of the direction of the relationship. It's predicted that as job tenure increases, job satisfaction will also increase, ultimately indicating a positive slope. Within the results and discussion section, data will be visually represented with a scatter plot. Job tenure will be charted on the x-axis, and job satisfaction will be charted on the y-axis to provide a visualization of association. The regression line is going to be overlaid over the scatter plot. Projected discussion and limitations. Following the analysis of study data, findings will be reported under the results section. It's projected that job satisfaction scores will differ on average by remote status, supporting the primary hypothesis that remote work has a positive relationship with job satisfaction. Age, category, location, job type, and job tenure are each anticipated to influence job satisfaction as well, supporting hypotheses 2, 3, and 4. The major anticipated finding that hybrid remote work opportunities may provide the most flexibility and opportunity and thus yield the highest employee job satisfaction score. Anticipated limitations include possible unequal number of participation in groups by location and by age. I'm concerned that I may have, for instance, more participants from our Manhattan office than from our Westchester or Long Island offices. Ultimately, I will cross this when we get into semester 2, but that is on my radar. Another consideration is the truthfulness of responses as a possible limitation of this study. For instance, if employees feel inclined to respond a certain way because they're being surveyed at work, I will heavily influence or I will heavily stress during our recruitment phase and briefing and debriefing of participants that participation is anonymous. However, this is a concern as a possible limitation of the study. A discussion of the larger theoretical and empirical context to explain the results, as well as limitations and direction for future research, is going to be outlined in the discussion section of my project. And I look forward to working on that in the next semester. This is my references sheet. I tried to fit everything here onto one sheet just so it's available. And as well, my references and citations are noted in the comments on each slide in the Google Slides. Thank you all so much for your audience and your feedback and your suggestions. It's been really a privilege to work with you all throughout this semester, and I'm excited to continue. Thank you, everyone.